Today we're going to delve into topic 17, lesson 5. We'll break it up into 2 days. Today we're going to talk more about the interwar social, scientific, and artistic changes, the cultural changes emerging at the time. And a lot of it is centered around the 20s. And then in the subsequent lesson, we'll talk more about the period from 1929 onward with the Great Depression. We'll talk more about some of the economic issues occurring. So let's look at the interwar social change for right now. And just keep in mind that Europe had been devastated by this war. And it really affected the psyche of the time. And had an enormous cultural impact. The United States underwent changes as well. The war didn't hit home. Their soldiers went overseas. They were there for a more brief period. Our cities didn't get destroyed and devastated. So it wasn't quite as up close and personal for us at all. I mean, no doubt we were affected, but it was a different entity. By the 1920s, or shortly after the war actually, we're wanting to enjoy life again. For people who had seen the war, there's more of a sense of not quite purposelessness, but what does it all mean? And we'll see that in some of the artistic movements that emerged during the time. So there are many key terms associated with this era. I would look them over. A flapper is just a woman who rejected the Victorian sense of style because it was very constraining. And not just style, but the expectations that were put on women, where you had to behave in such a narrow set of dictates that it was hard to have any individuality at all. I mean, the moral imposition of it all was very arbitrary and overly constrained. So kind of doing the exact opposite, maybe to extreme, because that's what happens sometimes before you find that happy medium. The flapper is, shaking off those shackles of societal constraints and stylistic constraints. And they're wanting to embrace new freedoms as well. Prohibition is the ban of manufacture and sale of alcoholic beverages in the United States. So this didn't happen in Europe. This was a United States phenomenon. I think some of the things that were happening is that men were coming home and maybe neglecting their responsibilities at that time, due to excessive inebriation. It also can cause absenteeism. There's just a lot of drinking. So prohibition was actually a movement started by women who wanted this to end. And it effectively did for about maybe 14 years or so. Of course, with prohibition, whenever you ban something or take an extreme view of something, you will see the opposite. So that might be why my grandmother always said everything in moderation. But in opposing prohibition is the escalation of organized crime, because now they're going to sell alcohol illegally. They're bootlegging alcohol, that's what they called it. So you'll see during this period of prohibition a major increase of organized crime centered around the illicit sale of alcohol. There's also something called speakeasies that arise out of the period. These were illegal bars where alcohol was served during Prohibition. Another thing occurring in the late 19 teens, like maybe 1916 through the 20s, maybe early 30s. It's the Harlem Renaissance, and that was a cultural awakening in among African Americans in the United States. And it was really centered in the Harlem Renaissance. This is where this awakening is taking place and emerging. You see a renaissance of art and music and literature. So jazz came out of this period too, not just in Harlem though, but it was certainly showcased there. Psychoanalysis is another thing that emerged from this time period. It's a method of studying how the mind works and treating mental disorders. And prior to this time, people really didn't reflect inward that much. So this was new. And the whole idea of having an unconscious mind and a subconscious mind, people wanted to delve into that. They were fascinated. Some of the art that came out of this era reflects that. But let's start with abstract art. Typically in conventional art, you see a very representational subject. Alright? During this time, when there's kind of a free-for-all, as far as structure, order, and convention is concerned, you're going to see abstract art, a form of art composed of lines, colors, and shapes, sometimes with no recognizable subject. Then Dadaism emerges. Dada basically says, look, stop trying to make sense out of life. Everything's nonsensical. There is no purpose. There is no sense. So it rejected all traditional convention and just showcased things that just didn't make sense or didn't go together. Surrealism comes out of Dadaism, and it looks similar in a sense, but Surrealism kind of is embracing that whole psychoanalysis angle. It's an art movement that attempts to portray the workings of the unconscious mind. So perhaps something won't make sense to you in a surreal piece of work, but it's supposed to reflect something that's going on internally. This slide is just 1920s slang. It's just for fun. You can look that up later. Now, what changes did Western society and cultural experience after World War I? That's the real question. So I already said that society and culture were shaken by the experience of war. This reaction occurred in Europe and the United States and many parts of the world, but probably more devastatingly so in areas that saw battle and were destroyed by it. In science during this time, discoveries were changing what people thought they knew. So in a strange way, science is almost unsettling, too. And these same shifts were mirrored in music, literature, and the fine arts. So culture was changing. The culture that existed before World War I no longer fit the world. During the decade known as the Roaring '20s, times were good for many Americans. The economy was booming, unemployment was low, and the stock market was climbing steadily. It was an exciting time for American pop culture as well, because movies and radio exploded into popularity. Artists and writers throughout the country were documenting the changes. Now think of movies and radio as really elevating, kind of, it brought people into mass media. This is really when mass media was emerging. Today we're so used to it, we're surrounded, and we're drowning in it. Alright, but at this time, this was creating more of a mass consciousness. Now, changes did not occur without conflict. These conflicts, and what one historian has called a cultural war, occurred between city dwellers and small-town residents who were very different in their values and outlook and worldview. There's conflicts between Protestants and Catholics, between blacks and whites. African Americans are more and more asserting their rights, and there's also at the same time a reemergence of the Ku Klux Klan in record numbers. So that's disturbing. Then you have these new women, and then you have the advocates of old-fashioned Victorian Moors. So it's like this constant clash of cultures. During the 1920s, new technologies changed the way people lived in the world. Some of these changes included affordable cars, improved telephones, motion pictures, radio, labor-saving devices such as washing machines and vacuum cleaners. So imagine if, you don't have a microwave, you have a wood-burning stove, you don't have a washing machine, you're doing everything by hand. There's no vacuum cleaners, there's no refrigeration, for example. All of these things really kept you shackled at the home. Because everything took so much time to do. And so these labor-saving devices sort of revolutionized things in that women could have, for example, a little bit more leisure time, particularly in the middle classes and upper classes. Maybe not so much in the working and lower classes, but they're still advantageous or labor-saving in any sense. So I want you to think of these advances as helping to create a mass culture, and not just a mass culture, but a consumer culture, because radio and movies are advertising goods and mass available to the masses. So just think of that. Radio being an early example of mass media, linking people over long distances. So the world is becoming smaller. I'm going to stop here, but we have more slides to go over, so I'm going to record that last batch.